Side Hustle Show 167. This is Profit Stacking in the Sharing Economy.
Welcome to the Side Hustle Show, where aspiring part-time entrepreneurs learn how to turn their side hustle dreams into reality. Because your 9 to 5 may make you a living, but your 5 to 9 makes you alive. And now, your host, Nick Loper.
What's up? Nick Loper here. Welcome to the Side Hustle Show, where we break down the ideas and actions it takes to build job-free income streams. And of course, share the results, good, bad, and ugly, along the way. Today's episode is about a growing trend in what I'll call peer-to-peer commerce. And often we call this the sharing economy. The sharing economy centers on turning your underutilized assets, your car, your house, your time, your money, your expertise, into profit centers for you. My guest today is Glenn Carter. He's the author of Secrets of the Sharing Economy. It's a book series all about, as you guessed it, the sharing economy. And he's the founder of thecasualcapitalist.com. Now, we're going to dive into some of Glenn's favorite money-making platforms and what he sees as the biggest side hustle opportunities in this space. All the notes and links, plus a free PDF highlight reel from this conversation, are at sidehustlenation.com/sharing. Plus, stick around to hear how you can grab a free copy of Glenn's book after the conversation. Now, before we dive in, I want to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, a brand new sponsor to the Side Hustle Show, and that's FreshBooks.com. FreshBooks is the small business accounting software built specifically for side hustlers and freelancers. I'll be back to tell you a little bit more about FreshBooks, plus my top takeaways from this conversation with Glenn after the interview, but you can get started with your free 30-day trial at freshbooks.com/sidehustle. Ready? Let's do it.
You know, my philosophy is that the sharing economy, it's here to stay. There's going to be growing pains, and these growing pains are good. But in the meantime, we plan on profiting. So
in that ideal, Airbnb is playing in the space. Hey, we have all this underutilized real estate. Here's a way to profit from that from the owner's perspective. And here's a way to save money from the renter's perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And interestingly, as a vote of confidence to this new trend, Merriam-Webster just added the sharing economy to its edition, and they define it as economic activity that involves individuals buying or selling, usually temporary access to goods or services, especially as arranged through an online company or organization. Now, these companies are essentially these websites that act as intermediaries between consumers, exactly like you just said, Nick, such as Airbnb, with the old mentality of excess consumption is now moving towards more one of access. So instead of owning a car, you can use one only when you need it. Instead of owning 1,000 consumer or retail items, you can rent them from others. So this new economic model is not about sharing. It's really about access.
It's the shift from ownership to access, which I think has a lot of efficiencies and some really fun things to play around with in there. So let's, nomenclature aside, as a side hustler, as an entrepreneur, how do I tap into this trend to make some money?
Well, certainly there's a number of ways to, and it depends on your lifestyle and where you live and what kind of assets you have. But just to take a quick step back on sort of the broader income potential, I'm sure many of your listeners may have heard about the PricewaterhouseCoopers study that estimated the sharing economy sector as a whole by 2025 is estimated to grow to over $300 billion. And that same number for 2013 is $15 billion. So this is explosive growth. And I even read the other day in the Huffington Post that they label the sharing economy as being the fourth industrial revolution. So let's bring that down to our level now. You know, that's sort of the macro.
300 billion.
By 2025, yes.
Oh, okay. So it's like, how can I get my piece of that 300 billion? That's huge.
Yeah, well, exactly. So, and we bring this down to the micro level, and that's really what we're trying to do at the Casual Capitalist. What does that mean for us? And according to a number of economic studies, the sharing economy is paying out tens of millions of dollars every day to people like us, to side hustlers, and that number is growing. So our goal is really to teach people how to take their slice of that pie.
Well, sounds good. How do we get started?
One of the categories would be home sharing. So if you have a home or a secondary property that you want to rent out, you can do that. And then there's other categories such as office space. If you don't want to share a room for someone to rent, you can share a room or a basement apartment for commercial purposes. There's ride sharing. There's the sharing economy for artists. There's a number of websites out there that helps you share and sell artistic pursuits. There's clothing sharing economy platforms. There's platforms for animal lovers. There's parking services. You know, you can share spare parking spots that you have. You can deliver goods. There's traveling where you can act as a tour guide. And this is sort of the moving towards that blurring of the lines of what is the sharing economy. The traveling ones where you're acting as a tour guide and delivering goods, you're sort of sharing your spare time a little bit. But either way, these are platforms that can certainly earn you money. And we try to break them all down in the book. And there's a lot out there to choose from.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like there's something almost for everyone. Now, so we've heard of Uber, obviously. We've heard of Airbnb. What are some of your other favorites that maybe we haven't heard of or maybe we're not as familiar with that you think have still a pretty strong earning potential?
I really like the meal sharing ones. I was talking to someone from our community the other day. His name is Sammy, and he's from New York City. He's never taken a cooking class, but he considers himself an amateur chef, and he wants to open up his own restaurant, but it's a little competitive and expensive to do that in New York City. So instead, he decided to open up his own home restaurant through the meal sharing websites. They're called Feastly and Eat With. And for a 5-course meal, Sammy charges $55 per person. He can accommodate up to 8 guests. He told me that he provides wine and beer for the dinner, which makes, $55 a great deal for tourists looking for a local meal experience.
Yeah.
Especially in New York City, that's a steal. And Sammy was telling me he gets more requests for meals than he can actually accommodate. So he hosts one meal a week, and it gives him a gross income of just over $400 a week, $1,700 approximately a month. So after groceries, he clears about $1,000 a month for 4 days of work, and he gets the leftovers. So the meal sharing platforms are ones we really like. Other profitable ones, and we can get into the income potential later because each of these platforms have different income potential, obviously. Another one we like other than the meal sharing ones are tutoring. Those are starting to become a lot more popular and profitable. There's a website called Wyzant. It's Wyzant. And if you have any teachable skill, whether that's hard science, literature, English, or anything that might be sort of unique. Like I think I saw there on the other day, there was a course on oyster cooking or something like that. So basically anything that you can teach, there's a number of tutoring and teaching websites that you can leverage to teach via Skype. People who are willing to pay to learn about a number of different topics.
Okay, and those Wyzant and some of these other tutoring platforms are one-on-one versus I'm going to create the definitive course on oyster cooking and put that up on Udemy or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Udemy is one of the ones we talk about, but there's a number of others. I mentioned Wyzant. There's another popular one called Take Lessons and another one called Skillshare, which is a bit more specialized, but very profitable. So these are the ones, because I think on Wyzant, the average income is about $30 an hour to do lessons via Skype.
And then there's a handful of other ones too, and there's probably no exclusivity clause to say, okay, if you're teaching over here, we own you. You're welcome to put your profile up on these other tutoring platforms as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that $30 an hour for different tutoring skills? Is that pretty common, pretty standard, or higher, lower, some other platforms?
That's pretty standard. Udemy is obviously different because you're creating an entire course, but on takelessons.com and Skillshare is a bit higher because it's a bit more specialized and the recruitment process is a bit more intensive. But $30 an hour is the average that Wyzant says that their tutors make.
Are you doing these yourself? Are you like hosting dinners at your place with meal sharing and stuff?
I've been a user of meal sharing. I've never been a seller. I mostly have my experience with Airbnb and TaskRabbit and a couple others, but I've been a user of a lot of these. I really got my start with Airbnb, but I haven't branched out to the meal sharing yet.
Okay, let's talk about TaskRabbit for a minute, because that's one of the older platforms, or one of the ones I'm more familiar with. It's kind of like an errand running service, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, exactly. It's an errand running service, but it's a bit more than that. They branched out now to do virtual errands as well. So, you don't have to be in a particular location to complete a task on TaskRabbit. You can do tasks virtually now. Anything from, moving to assembling IKEA furniture to painting to yard work, whatever. I read an article the other day that some woman in Atlanta hired an actor to play her at a friend's birthday party because she wasn't able to make it. So, and I think I saw someone who posted an ad because they wanted someone to wait in line for them for the new Apple iPhone, and they found someone. So literally anything you can think of, tasks, errands, can be outsourced.
Oh, okay. How much do the birthday party stand-in earn?
I don't know. They didn't actually say how much she paid her. I hope she was reimbursed because that must have been really awkward.
Now, on each of these, it sounds like you can set your own rates versus Uber. You're kind of like the fare is the fare.
For the most part, you can set your own rates, but a lot of these platforms use an algorithm to decide what the actual earning income is going to be. It's something worth noting as well is that every single one of these platforms have to earn some money. So they'll take a certain portion of your income to keep the lights on, basically. So you always have to factor that in as well.
Uber specifically, but, maybe sharing economy in a broad sense is like, hey, look, I'm an independent contractor. I am kind of at the whim of this big venture-backed company, and they keep cutting my rate. It's an awkward way of phrasing it. Like there's some risk in these platforms too.
Certainly you're at the mercy of the particular platform, but we advocate branching out. And in fact, we have a specific term for it. It's called stacking, and it's sort of your way of diversifying in the sharing economy. Certainly you are at the whim of that particular platform, but there's also dozens of other platforms out there that you can branch out to. If you're an Uber driver and all of a sudden Uber shuts its doors, which it won't, there's a bunch of other ride sharing platforms that you could use. So even with home sharing and Airbnb, there's other websites called VRBO and HomeAway that you can use as well. Now they're not as popular, but certainly I've earned money on those and others can as well. So there's no reason to just stick to one particular platform and then say, oh, well, they got me if they shut down. I mean, there's definitely ways to diversify and to risk manage.
On platforms like Wiseout, on platforms like TaskRabbit, are you seeing any common tactics that people are using to build up that initial profile? I'm sure they all have like ratings and reviews, and it's like, well, I don't want to hire the guy that is sitting with 0 stars.
Absolutely. There's a number of tactics to use depending on your platform, but typically we always argue that you should price low in the beginning to get your first couple customers, because every single sharing economy platform has a feedback rating mechanism to ensure accountability. And this is great. I mean, or else, the sharing economy would be the Wild West. These systems are great. But if you're just starting out, it can be daunting for someone, who says to themselves, I don't have any ratings. How am I going to get someone? But you can own that inexperience on that platform, write it in your profile, make your price, 10 to 15% lower than your competitors. And I've had people talk to me about this time and time again, and they always come back and say, wow, I didn't realize how easy it was going to be to get customers. But after you get your first couple of ratings, it becomes all that easier.
You see people taking this full time?
Oh, absolutely. I've had a number of conversations with people who use a number of sharing economy platforms, and they stagger them throughout their day. They'll drive for Uber in the morning. They'll do a couple tasks on TaskRabbit, and then they'll spend a couple hours at the local coffee shop freelancing on Upwork, and then they'll drive again in rush hour when rates are high again on Uber. I was talking to another retiree in Atlanta, I think it was, who works full-time on TaskRabbit. He said he works 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. He brings in about $7,000 a month, and that's just on TaskRabbit. That's not on other platforms. So
that's great. What kind of tasks is he rabbiting?
He is the pro at IKEA assembling.
Okay. You could hire him.
He's the go-to guy in Atlanta for assembling IKEA. So everyone who lives in Atlanta, look up Richard on TaskRabbit. Apparently he's
got a nice profile built out around IKEA assembly. I like it.
Yeah, exactly. You can write a book.
That's actually kind of encouraging, because some of this stuff, it's like, okay, if I'm netting $15 an hour on Uber, I know because they've cut rates so many times, or it's like, and then I got to pay maintenance and gas and all this stuff. What's my opportunity cost on that stuff versus like, I'm still hustling. I'm still, and obviously I have no problem against hustling, but I'm still trading time for dollars. And I'm curious on your take on this. Do you still recommend this as a way for somebody to get started in earning side hustle income, or a stopgap if there's like an unexpected layoff or something?
I completely agree. And there's definitely an opportunity cost. We've always argued on the website and in the books that this shouldn't be a get rich quick scheme. Again, we see it, I wouldn't say a stopgap, but anyone who has consumer debt or who's looking for some flexibility because they want to quit their day job, we certainly suggest the sharing economy is a great tool in your tool belt. It's not the be all and end all. It's not a way to make millions of dollars, but you want to start a business on the side, but you can't afford to quit your job. The sharing economy is a great way to fill that gap. If you're retired and you're looking for something to do, if you're looking for some social interaction, turn on your smartphone 2 hours out of every day and accept a couple tasks on TaskRabbit or a couple rides on Uber, or rent out your basement apartment and, meet different people. It's not a full-time career. For some it is, and that's great. But, statistics time and time again have shown that workers in the sharing economy are vastly part-time, I think more than 90%. And I think that's great because it shows the flexibility of it. It's a great way to side hustle when you want to side hustle and earn a little bit of extra income. And, a couple $100 a month for turning your smartphone on, 1 hour a day is pretty good.
Yeah, not bad at all. Let's talk a little bit more about profit stacking in the sharing economy, because I know you got some interesting stuff on that for people who are, leveraging multiple platforms.
Yeah, we refer to it as platform stacking, and it's not a very complicated term. So one of the things we found early on in our community is that on average, people were only using one sharing economy platform, yet they said that their one major problem with the sharing economy is that they were only working one platform, so they weren't earning a whole lot of money. As I mentioned, all of these sharing economy categories like ride sharing, home sharing, or tasking services, there's at least half a dozen other websites that you can use other than the big ones like Uber, Airbnb, TaskRabbit. We had one Uber driver saying, I can only work one platform. And simply put, we just said, why aren't you driving on Lyft as well? They doubled their income overnight. Stack all of these platforms, increase your income potential.
Your reviews, your reputation, they don't syndicate to these other platforms.
They don't. And that's unfortunate. And there's been a lot of discussion about cross-platform ratings, which I think there's some sort of validity to. And I think 5 years from now, this is something that we're going to be moving into, where your online reputation, or what we like to refer to as your reputation capital, is going to follow you across multiple platforms. Just to go back on the platform stacking briefly, I was talking with Jordan. He's a college student from Tallahassee. He actually earns, he told me, $1,700 a month through the sharing economy. He works 2 hours a day on weekdays. He goes to Florida State University and he's in his second year of accounting. So he works 3 platforms simultaneously. First one's Airbnb. He has a 2-bedroom apartment close to campus and he rents it out. Averages about $700 a month. He also works on TaskRabbit. He's good at online research. He does this every other day for about 2 hours, he said, which makes him $400 a month. And then my favorite is the third one he uses, which is the tutoring. He tutors on Wyzant and takelessons.com. He tutors accounting and math online for 1 hour a day at $30 an hour, which makes him $600 a month. So in all, he brings in $1,700 a month by working part-time in the sharing economy. And this more than covers his college costs. So that's really what platform stacking is about, is leveraging all of these underutilized assets in your life to make money on various platforms instead of just one.
Yeah, dude, if I was making $1,700 a month in college, I'd be rolling in it. That's awesome.
Yeah, a lot of pub nights for Jordan.
Glenn, how do you recommend people get started? So obviously they can check out the book. Does your website have a giant list of these platforms where you kind of pick and choose which ones sound most appealing?
We always advocate 3 things. Number 1, check out our website. Like you mentioned, we have a bunch of free resources to help get people started. Number 2, we actually have a quiz on our website. This is essentially a personality quiz that asks you, about 20 yes or no questions about your lifestyle. It takes 5 minutes, and then it'll tell you based on your answers which sharing economy platform you should start with. It's not very in-depth. It's just sort of a starting point to say, hey, based on your answers, you may want to check out some ride-sharing platforms, or hey, based on your answers, you may want to check out animal share, like the dog vacay, animal babysitting, whatever. So that's a free resource on our site. And number 3, which I always say is the most important, to become a user in the sharing economy. So if you're thinking of selling on Airbnb, Uber, TaskRabbit, a meal sharing platform, simply start using it first. This is the best way to talk to people who are selling on it, ask them questions, find out which kind of municipal laws or provincial or state laws will affect you, because, the sharing economy is operating in a gray area right now. And I always suggest people to wrap their head around their local laws before they get started in the sharing economy so they don't get themselves in trouble. Check out your own jurisdiction and what's going on there, especially with like Uber. Insurance is another big one. And that's why that last of the 3 points of how to get started in the sharing economy is the most important. Use the service first. You can talk to people who are selling it and you can ask them these questions. From my experience, they're more than happy to talk about their side hustles.
Absolutely. Glenn, thank you so much for joining me. It's thecasualcapitalist.com and the Secrets of the Sharing Economy books. We'll link those up in the show notes. And let's wrap this thing up with your number 1 tip for Side Hustle Nation.
Get started in the sharing economy.
I saw that one coming.
Thanks a lot, Nick, for having me. And keep up the good work.
This edition of the Side Hustle Show is brought to you by FreshBooks.com. One of the biggest advantages of the sharing economy specifically, and side hustling and entrepreneurship in general, is making your own schedule. It's that time freedom, right? Now, making the most out of your limited hours can also be one of the trickiest things about running your own business. Any successful entrepreneur will tell you that time is one of their most valuable assets. It's your only non-renewable resource. And managing time, or the constant lack of it, was actually the number one reported challenge facing Side Hustle Nation in my recent survey. Now, our friends at FreshBooks intimately recognized the struggle and built some really cool time-saving tools right into their award-winning accounting software. FreshBooks is a super simple cloud accounting service that's giving thousands of side hustlers, freelancers, and entrepreneurs like you the tools to save time billing and get paid faster. You'll be creating and sending invoices in minutes, watching expenses organize themselves, and tracking your time almost instantly. And probably wondering why you didn't start sooner. If you've got questions, help is free forever, and you can always count on FreshBooks support rockstars to go above and beyond whenever you need a hand. To try FreshBooks completely free for 30 days, just go to freshbooks.com/sidehustle or enter the Side Hustle Show in the How Did You Hear About Us section. That's freshbooks.com/sidehustle for your free 30-day trial. All right. Now, did Glenn get you inspired to take a look at the sharing economy, see what types of money-making platforms might be right up your alley? Now, I've compiled all the highlights from this conversation, plus Glenn's top tips in a free downloadable PDF for you at sidehustlenation.com/sharing. And I've also included links to all of the platforms mentioned there as well. Side Hustle Show listeners can actually get a free copy of Glenn's book, Secrets of the Sharing Economy, if you go to thecasualcapitalist.com/secrets1. It's thecasualcapitalist.com/secrets and then the number 1. So after the recording with Glenn, I asked him, hey, your book is called Secrets of the Sharing Economy. What's the big secret? And he says the secret is that not everyone knows about these platforms yet. So according to the latest data that I've seen, 2 in 5 adults, and I'm assuming that's U.S. data, 2 in 5 American adults have used sharing economy platforms, and 1 in 5 adults have sold on them. So I think there's a huge room for growth, and even if it seems like you're late to the party, there's just a big upside potential for all of these platforms. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from the call, just that simply this is becoming too big to ignore, and it's still in its very early days. Another takeaway for me is that there's a sharing economy platform for almost anything you can imagine, and it just might take a little bit of research, a little bit of patience, and maybe a little bit of portfolio building time to get you started. And actually, tell you what, I'm going to work on compiling a massive list of all the sharing economy platforms I can find. And when that's ready, I'm going to add it to the show notes links for this episode. I couldn't really find a definitive list out there, so I took that as a sign that I needed to build it. And it's just not ready at airtime. So I'll get that going for you guys. And of course, the final takeaway for me is wherever you can and wherever it makes sense, to use these platforms to accelerate or launch your own brand. Like remove some of that platform risk. Like if TaskRabbit disappears, the IKEA furniture guy in Atlanta, he's probably got enough of a word of mouth client base and a reputation built up. He's going to be just fine. Thank you so much for listening. I'm off to Seattle for the weekend, hang out with some very excited first-time grandparents. Until next week, let's go out there, make something happen, and I'll catch you in the next edition of the Side Hustle Show. It is a juicy one. You're not going to want to miss it. Hustle on.
Thanks for listening to the Side Hustle Show at www.sidehustlenation.com.